大丈夫かな。
もう放置もなしのゲームってある。ここで言わせてほしい。それがまさにこのゲーム。
すいません。
ここで言わせてほしい。それがまさにこのゲーム。
すいません。
ここで言わせてほしい。それがまさに。
大丈夫ですね。はい。音声チェック、一応、済ませました。定刻になったら、あと1分弱ですかね。定刻になったら、配信開始したいと思います。海斗優さん、おはようございます。先ほどはどうも。はい。今日もよろしくお願いします。うん。少々お待ちください。ストリームの状況は OK。はい。時間になりましたね。それでは、配信の方開始していきたいと思います。どうも皆さん、おはようございます。ニューズディアブロラボのゆうでございます。このチャンネルは、ディアブロシリーズをはじめとする様々なハクスラタイトルについて深々と掘り下げていくチャンネルでございます。興味関心おありの方、ぜひですね、チャンネル登録をご検討いただけると嬉しいです。それで今日のテーマなんですけれども、ディアブロ4のですね、シーズン8、パッチ、2.2.0 の PTR に関するキャンプファイアチャットが行われるということで、その生配信の模様を配信しながら生通訳を、挟んでいこうという、配信、恒例の配信でございます。で、今の現状について、結構情報が溜まってきたので、15分ないんですけれども、ざっくり、そうですね、今の現状を把握しておきたいかなということで、15分前に、前座解説を行おうということで、この時間、45分からですね、開始することにしました。でなんですけれども、ご覧の今画面に、表示されていると思うんですけれども、はい、そうですね、ラストイポック、パスオブエグザイル2、それとあとディアブロ4ですね。このハクスラ3タイトルが、三つどもえ状態になっています。正確にはこれにパスオブエグザイル1ですね、が入ることによって四つどもえみたいな感じになっています。はい。ちょっとパスオブエグザイル1に関しては、手持ちの情報が追い切れてないこともあるので、今回はちょっと、割愛させていただきますけれども、パスオブエグザイル1も、結構今、遅れながらも、いろいろと、企画が進行中という、そういう状態でございます。で、まずですね、それぞれの、新しいシーズンですね。あるいはリーグ、リーグというのは、パスオブエグザイルでのそのシーズンの呼び方のことをリーグと言うんですけれども、要はですね、この3タイトルの、次のシーズンがいつ始まるのかということで、日付が決定しているのは今のところラストエポックだけですね。来月4月の2日ということで決定しています。ちょっとシーズン1とシーズン2の間で、随分1年くらいですかね。時間が空いてしまったんですけれども、4月の2日に、シーズン2開幕ということが決まっております。で、パスオブエグザイル2が、 一番早いのかな。その、10日くらい前、の3月の20日頃と、いうふうに、言われてますけれども、金曜日に仮に開始というふうに考えますと、3月の21日、日本時間だと3月の22日ですかね、に開幕という可能性が出てきています。で、こちら新しいリーグ、経済リセットですね、なんかも行われるので、フレッシュスタートですね、レベル1から新キャラを育てるというような形になるかと思います。で、ディアブロ4ですね。ディアブロ4に関しては、4月の中旬以降、場合によっては4月の下旬に、後ろ倒しになるんじゃないかというふうな、噂も出ています。なるべくパスオブエグザイル2、ラストエポックとパスオブエグザイル1ですね。その、新リーグに、新シーズンにそれぞれ勝ち合わないようにというような意味合いと、で、あと、若干開発の都合もあるのかなという感じも、しております。で、よいしょっと。はい。ラストエポックの方は、新派閥として、ザ・ウォーベン、ウォーベンというのは、織物のことを言うんですけれども、新しくですね、今まで、その、トレードができる派閥と、それとあと、ソロセルフファウンドですね。トレードに依存しない、自力ゲット、アイテムの自力ゲットを中心にしてドロップを優遇するという、そういう派閥とがあったんですけれども、それに新しくですね、もう一つ派閥を追加しようという、話が出ています。それとあと、にわかにラストエポックが注目されている最大の理由がこれなんですけれども、WASD ですね、WASD。WASD っていうのは、キーボードのWASD のキーが、それぞれ、古き良き時代は、これが十字キーの代わりだったんですね。はい。で、それを使って、それと十字キーを組み合わせることによって、コントローラーをお使いの方はよくわかるかと思います。コントローラーの右スティックと左スティックですね。これを、キーボードで実現しようと。要は引き打ち、パスオブエグザイル2の引き打ちのようなことができるようになりますよという、そういう、実装ですね。操作実装が、ラストエポックの方でも実現するという、それで、にわかに、注目度が上がっている、状態です。はい。なので私もちょっと4月2日楽しみにしています。詳しい話はまたレポートしたいなというふうに思っています。で、パスオブエグザイル2の方はパッチ 0.2.0 ですね。初めての大型パッチになるかと思います。はい。新上級職、画像が公開されてますけれども、これ多分マーセナリーでしょうね。マーセナリーの新しいアセンダンシー、要は上級職が出てくると。で、この新しいマーセナリーの上級職はなんと盾と、で、あと剣を持っていると。で、剣、今まで剣なかったんですけれども、剣も、おそらく、新しい武器種ということで追加されるようになるんじゃないかなというふうに思っています。はい。そういった新上級職、新アイテム、それとあと、新しいユニークアイテムとか、新しいスキルとかが増えるほか、エコノミーリセットですね。いわゆるその、ラダーリセットみたいなもんですね。新しく、その、レベル1から全員、リスタートするよという、そういう、ディアブロ4でもおなじみの、シーズンリセットですね。になります。 で、あと、今のところ発表は全然ないんですけれども、新クラスが追加されるのではないかなというような話が噂として出ています。というより、開発スケジュールやバランスチェックなんかもしようと思うと、ここで新クラスを、1クラスでも2クラスでも増やしておかないと、間に合わなくなってくるかなというのもあるので、新クラス追加、ある程度は、規定路線になるんじゃないかなと思っています。それとあとエンドゲーム強化ですね。こういったような、もりもりの内容で、3月の下旬あたりに、パッチリリース、新リーグ開幕ということに、なるんじゃないかなと思っています。で、この2タイトルに対抗する立場にあるのが、今日の、ディアブロ4ですね。ディアブロ4の方になるんですけれども、新しい新シーズンが、ちょっと後ろ倒しになって4月の中旬もしくは下旬あたりになるんじゃないかなと。で、その内容、これに対抗してくる内容がどういったものになるかというのが今日のキャンプファイアチャットで、パッチ 2.2.0 ですね、の PTR の内容が発表されるということになっています。どうも結構いろいろな、盛りだくさんな内容になってるようなので、またですね、2時間とかいう形になる配信時間2時間、に達するのではないかなというふうに恐れております。はい。なので、朝6時くらいまでですかね、配信することになるのではないかなというふうに考えています。ご覧の皆様も、そういうつもりで、ご覧になっていただければなというふうに思います。はい。以上3タイトルなんですけれども、せっかくですね、配信していることもありますので、ちょっとアンケートを取ってみたいと思います。質問どうしようかな。春の新シーズン。春の新シーズン。あなたがプレイするハクスラタイトルはプレイしたいかな。一番プレイしたいハクスラタイトルは次のうちのどれですかということですね。で、1番目が、まず、ディアブロ4。で、2番目に、パスオブエグザイルで選択肢追加して、3番目、パスオブエグザイル2。すいません、グリムドーンやりたいという人は、ちょっと、グリムドーン以外で選んでください。はい。ちょっと選択肢が5つ入らないので、パスオブエグザイル2に、ラストエポックですね。はい。では、アンケート開始します。はい。春の新シーズン、あなたが一番プレイしたいハクスラタイトルは次のうちどれですかということで、ディアブロ4、パスオブエグザイル、パスオブエグザイル2、ラストエポックということでアンケートを取ってみようと思います。はい。3月末から4月末にかけての春の、新シーズンですね。はい。になります。これ、そうですね。今2票入ってますけれども、2票ともディアブロ4ですね、になっています。理想を言えばこれ、いい感じでどれも面白くなっていっ で、どれがいい、どれが悪いではなくって、どれも、お互いにプレッシャーをかけつつ、いいコンテンツを出していって、そのいいものをお互い吸収し合って、競っていくっていうのが一番理想的なパターンなんですけれども、そうなるかならないかは、経過を見て、ということになりますね。はい。3時58分、あと2分ほどで配信が始まると思われるので、今多分予告編ですね、の方が、配信されてるのではないかなと思う。予告編ないのか、今日は。はい。いきなり、配信が始まるっぽいですね。なので、あと、1分少々。はい。で、配信が始まります。で、このアンケートですね。ライブ配信中も、アンケート有効にしておきますので、ご覧になってる方、これ、一応誰がどこに投票したというような情報は一切残りませんので、ツイッターのアンケートと一緒です。お気軽に足跡とか残ったりしませんので、はい、お気軽に投票していただければなというふうに思っています。はい。そっか、ディアブロ4に、一応ディアブロ4結構やっぱり期待、大きいみたいですね。まだまだ。はい。では、59分になりましたので、ちょっとフルスクリーンモードにしたいと思います。よいしょ。はい。はい、現在4票ですね。ディアブロ4が 75% で3人、ラストイポックが1人、25% という形になっています。はい、アダム・フレッチャーですね。アダム・フレッチャー、チャールズ・ダン、
My name is Adam Fletcher. I'm the director of community here. Of course, I'm joined by this panel. A lot of familiar faces. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Colin Feiner. I'm a design director on Diablo 4.
Hey, I'm Derek Nunez. I'm a lead seasons designer here
デレック・ヌーンズ、コリン・ファイナー、それとあと先ほど言ったチャールズ・ダンですね。
Ruben Marquez, aka Bloodshed. He's actually behind the scenes. He'll be playing through some gameplay that we're going to be showing off here in a little bit. Oh, there he is. He's saying hi, waving. We'll see more of him here in a little bit.
ちなみに、もう一人のアダムフレッチャーじゃなくて、
Crazy day. First, I do want to start off with that we had a smoothie delivery this morning, and Marcus is not here. As you can see, I'm here hosting this because he forgot my smoothie in the order. So I just kicked him off the stream. No, I'm just kidding. But
もう一人のコミュニティマネージャーは司会をする予定だったけれども結局アダム・フレッチャーに変わったみたいですね。
But I know a few other topics that we wanted to hit on was kind of related to the quality of life stuff that's going to be coming with this specific season based off of, feedback and things we've seen within the game. And also one big topic is around mid-season updates.
ミッドシーズンアップデートについても、触れるということですね。そうするともう本当に盛りだくさんですね。パッチ 2.2.0 の、PTR に関して、それとあとミッドシーズンアップデートについての、その、話題で、あと QOL ですね。フィードバックに基づく QOL の話ですね。はい。シーズン7のこれまでのローンチリキャップ、それとあとミッドシーズンアップデートの、内容、について話をしますよ。はい、カイトユーさん、ジャクソン、はい、アダム・ジャクソンですね。アダム・ジャクソン、ブリを辞めたと。はい、ライオネット・ゲームズ、ライオネット・ゲームズに行ったんですか。そうですか。情報ありがとうございます。 ざいます。それは初耳でした。はい。アダム・ジャクソンは、ブリザードを辞めたので、今後、このキャンプファイヤーチャットに出てくることはありません。はい。
Sort of on the other hand, right, we didn't want
カイト
to
ユーさんありがとうございます。
underperforming builds to match the overperforming builds because we didn't want to create this insane, sort of arms race and then we're at pit tier 9,000, right? It'd be ridiculous. So what we ended up doing was actually kind of like anemic number tweaks. Like they weren't really necessarily making a big impact, and we took a step back and sort of asked ourselves, like, well, what are we actually getting out of this? What are you, the players, actually getting out of this? And I think we're at a sort of point where we want to pivot and adjust our philosophy a little bit. And I think we've already seen some of this philosophy come to life in season 7.
Yeah, exactly. I know, especially in the beginning of the season, people probably saw us make some tweaks in the first couple weeks related to some really crazy numbers that maybe they weren't even numbers.
またパワークリープっぽいものが起こったということのようですね。で、そこら辺で調整が必要になると。
Really, what we're going to start taking a look at is not doing massive swings in the mid-season, but instead focusing our efforts on the launch of a season. So we're going to take that time, and we're going to make sure that like there's a much higher quality launch release. And taking a lot of that balance time and making sure that when we do launch a season, it's higher quality, right? We want the pit tier disparities to be a little bit lower. We want to make sure that when a new season launches, the new builds that we're adding are going to be really effective, and there's a lot of new fun ways to play. This doesn't mean we're never going to balance or touch the game. It actually means we're just going to shift our efforts to the beginning of a season. Yeah. So early on, we're going to be pretty vigilant in terms of things that are underperforming or way overperforming and acting quickly on them.
Yeah, the goal here is really to get everything closer in terms of like just like less egregious, builds being super high up there. We saw that, I think, specifically in like season 6 with like the Spiritborn, and it kind of stayed consistent that way. We know we got a lot of feedback of like, hey, this feels kind of poopy.
まあ要するに壊れたビルドに関する話でしょうね。カイトギさん、ネクロ、ドルイド、ババソサはまあ上限の150、きっと150なら150をいったからねということですね。はい。
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that timing is really important because like our mid-season updates in the past had
で、調整をするタイミングについて割と大事かなと思っていますというチャールズ・ダウンの話ですね。
To make sure that if we are making those adjustments, it is at a point where hey, you're not complete with the season, you're not done yet, and you can adjust and you can make sure that your time is respected in that way.
Definitely. So to really clarify, when a season launches, I'll use Bloodwave as an example. That was something we saw pretty early on, and it was way too overtuned, right? Like you didn't really have to invest in your character to get to a point where you're godlike. And that is something that we would act quickly on as a part of the next season.
しすぎたっていう部分に対する対処ですね。
Very much an S tier build right now in this season.
S plus.
Yeah, S plus. I think the goal is not to immediately take it to F or even immediately take it to C or anything like that. It's really keep it still an S, but like also make sure that it's still like at least lined up with like the other builds that might be up there in that top tier.
Yeah. Conversely too, I just want to make it super clear. If we see things that we added that are new, for example, if the seasonal powers aren't performing in a way that feels really powerful and crunchy, we're going to be buffing those. So it's not only looking out for the S+, it's also looking for the things that we've
S プラスビルド、壊れビルドだけを見るのではなくて、アンダーパフォーミング、まああまり強くないビルドについてももちろん見ていくよという、そういう話ですね。
Just wanted to clarify that with players because we've seen a lot of questions about mid-season updates. Is this a mid-season update when they see a patch or something like that? And so going forward, I know that's going to be the plan as we look at updating the game in the future.
And if you hide things early, I will Liam Neeson your ass. I will know. I will know.
There we go.
隠してもわかるよっていう
話
ですね。
In the closet.
Yeah.
Like the little demon kid right behind you.
Exactly. Yeah. The other thing that we want to talk about is kind of like state of the game, especially with season 7. where we're at and kind of how we're looking at that towards season 8. I think one of the biggest points of feedback we've heard related to season 7 is kind of the pace of the game.
ゲームペースについてのフィードバック。
and you're like, holy crap, what happened? So I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just sort of our perspective on season 7 has been the progression is very fast. Way faster than we sort of expected.
要するに育成過程でしょうかね。育成過程があまりにも早すぎた。ディアブロ1、ディアブロ2を開発したデイビッド・プレビックなんかも体験全体、ゲーム体験全体をめちゃくちゃにしてしまってるなんていう発言が、インタビュー発言があったくらいなんですけれども、ちょっと早すぎるんじゃないかっていう、そういう話が出ましたね。
Our sort of stat page, it's not the greatest, but this is a picture of season 6. You can see on the y-axis here, it was taking roughly people around 15 to 17 hours on average.
はい、レベル60に達するまでの時間が、15から17時間、平均15から17時間になってきたと。
Forming your character where customization is really fun, right? You're not necessarily locked into a build. So we felt like that was a pretty good clip for hitting max level. It's on average, right? So you could either go faster or slower depending on sort of how much of a blaster you are. So we felt like that was a pretty good average, especially with difficulty tiers and your ability to sort of go faster or slower based on your pacing. And let's go to season 7 now.
で、シーズン7では、平均9時間、レベル60に達するまで平均9時間にそれがなっていたと。ちょっといくらなんでも早すぎるんじゃないかということですね。
So we are going to be making some changes just to adjust for a lot of the seasonal power and things like that. We're not going to necessarily nerf the power of the seasonal power. We still want you to feel powerful, but we are going to essentially take a look at the 1 to 25 experience and just smooth that out a little bit.
強いと、強さは感じてほしいけれども、このペースを少しなんとかしたいということですね。
But one thing we've done to sort of compensate that is we've taken a look at the itemization. We don't like that rares and sort of magic items immediately disappear after the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I think kind of get to that point like we were talking about.
レアアイテムとかマジックアイテムが最初の5分かそこいらでもう使い物にならなくなるとか、そういう状態はあまり好ましくないと。
So I know that we have some changes that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, and again, like a lot of this is in the spirit of making sure that zero to hero journey is really satisfying, right? That's what makes it so awesome when playing Diablo is that sort of I start with nothing and become a god, right? So we are taking a look at the itemization so that it doesn't just feel like a slog.
はい、アイテム設計についてもう少し考えてみようということで、TTR2.2.0 ですね、についてのアイテム設計。
The other thing that was contributing to this leveling sort of pace was that players are getting a legendary every 3 to 4 minutes, and that's from 1 to 60. It's not just in the end game. And it just felt like legendary item quality was just
3、4分間隔でレジェンダリーをゲットしていた状況をなんとか変えたいと。
We're also reducing the legendary rate from leveling. We're not really touching the end game legendary drop rates, but from leveling we are adjusting that, and to compensate that, to jump back into the magic and rares. We're making it so that magics can have up to 2 affixes. So sometimes you're going to find, from your 1 to 25 journey, a pretty good magic item. It might actually be better than a rare, for example, because it might have dropped earlier for you. It might have higher eye power.
マジックアイテムは最大2つアフィックス、特性ですね、がつくようにすると。で、レアアイテムは3つですね、アフィックスがつくようにすると。
But now that rare items can have up to 3 affixes, that means that you might have a really good imprintable base. It means all the rares that drop across the game from 1 to 60 could actually be pretty great here for you, especially with all of our crafting options. So we think that this helps smooth out the 1 to 60 journey. I will caveat that the rare quality is not the best at max level still. It's going to be a lower eye power, so you're not going to have to filter through.
ガイトユーさん、誰がそんなめんどくさいテストやりたいんだって大丈夫かということですね。
taking a look at the magic rarities or the item qualities is just going to make the experience feel a lot more rewarding and satisfying as you go through these levels.
レジェンダリーは以前最も優れた、アイテムであるということに変わりはないということですね。
Yeah, so the other half of Diablo is obviously the max level endgame, right?
マジックアイテムとレアアイテムの設計に関してはもうだいぶ長いことファンからいろいろ指摘があるわけですけれども、そこを変える気はないみたいですね。以前そのマジック、レア、レジェンダリーというそういうヒエラルキー自体は保ちたいと。
A lot of people got to Torment 4 very quickly.
はい、
So on average, it was taking players around 15 hours to get to Torment 4.
はい、だいたい平均15時間でトーメント4に、みんな達しているようだと。はい、で、全体の 50% のプレイヤーがトーメント4に、まあ半数ですね、トーメント4に達していると。
We really want like whatever the hardest Torment tier is, in this case Torment 4, to be aspirational. And to us, that means around 10%. That means that, you know, if you're really Johnny Badass, you know, you need to be in the top 10%.
だから先ほどのレジェンダリーの件もそうですけれども、一番高いティアに達するまでの時間があまりに短すぎるという、そういう話ですね。そうすると、あまり報われているというか、その、喜びが減災されるっていうことに対する、まあ、懸念ということなんでしょうね。
It's now 20% harder. It's actually like kind of stacking 20% every level. So and the end result is that, you know, a pit tier 100 is much harder than it was before, and that will that makes it, you know, harder to reach that absolute highest end, and gives you a little bit more for those builds and those blasters who are getting up to that highest pit tier. It's going to be quite a bit harder to get to quite that same level next season.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, sort of culminates in moving Torment 1 to pit tier 10 and effectively adding 10 pit tiers and increasing the multiplicative scaling of the pit tier scaling. Is the journey is going to be a lot more sort of satisfying.
トーメント1が、ピットティア、奈落のティア10からスタートすると。
So difficult that I don't believe any of you will reach it. I don't know, I'll do something silly on
で、トーメント、それとあとピットスケーリング。
That's a challenge to all of you out there.
Yeah, you all can vote on the silly thing that I do. But conversely, I just want to cover this really quickly, though. Torment 4 isn't going to be insanely harder than it was before. It's going to be roughly around
今までと比べてトーメント4がものすごく難しく難易度を上げるつもりでいると。
It's still achievable. It's just that upper end is also just going to be that much harder.
シーズン7でいうところのピットティア76くらいのそのレベルに難易度に持ってこう。
The big thing being, as you're leveling up, you're going to see a lot more opportunities to find items, especially with the changes to blue and yellow items there. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the big caveat is like at 60, the item power on legendaries is still going to be the best method and the best items to actually grab. So yeah, lots of big changes coming up. Great to actually walk through all of them. I know we have a ton more to talk about specifically around the new season. So
新しい新シーズンについて5万と話すことがあると。
And what players are actually going to be experiencing in this PTR. Again, just to redefine what PTR is for some people, because I got messages from people going like, well, PTRs are sometimes buggy. And I'm like, well, it's a PTR, so it is like a
PTR がバグだらけだという反響をいただいたりしますけれども、まあそれが PTR ですからということですね。はい。
When you guys actually jump into a PTR and experience it and give us feedback. because that helps tweak the start of the season for the better, essentially. But with Season 8, we will be having, of course, a PTR, and we'll be talking about it here in a second. And if you remember with Season 7, we kind of had this this overarching theme with like big changes in that season. One was specifically around what was mostly focused around like the whispers, and of course with Season 8 we have another overarching theme that we're really going to be talking about, where we'll be kind of even seeing an old friend. So Derek, do you want to chat about it here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, as you mentioned, seasons are kind of like our opportunity to shine focus on an existing system and really amplify or celebrate or enhance it within that respective season. So we've seen that with Season 4 with the Helltide revamps and whatnot, as you mentioned. Season 7 was the emphasis on the Tree of Whispers and Bounties. So as Colin kind of mapped out the journey to the end game, we wanted to shine focus on a major end game feature, namely surrounding our bosses. And we have a lot of really cool bosses in
エンドゲームボスについての話みたいですね。新しいボスがどうやら追加されるみたいです。
So Season 8 focus is on the lair boss system. We're going to be doing a whole mess of new things to it. So we're adding new bosses, new mechanics, quality of
新
life,
しいメカニッ
updates,
ク、
and
それとあ
a
と
revamped
QOL、
materials that
そ
I'm
れ
going to be
とあ
covering throughout the
と
course of the segment. So first I just want to kind of talk about the new bosses and additions to the roster. So when we're talking about the lair bosses, these are like the biggest, baddest, bosses of Sanctuary. So we're looking at how do we add to the roster in a meaningful way, but also which bosses do we add that are impactful and versatile enough to carry the entire theme of a season. So with that in mind, we're just asking ourselves a question of which are the right bosses to bring. You mentioned an old friend. So we had to choose something that was versatile. We had to choose something that was big, bad. So that's where we go to
強いボス。
Yes, Season 8, Belial's return. Belial's back in Sanctuary. He is
ベリアルですね。ディアブロ3で出てきたベリアルをどうやら復活させるというか実装するようです。
And he also has some very unique reward-related tricks up his sleeve that I'll cover a little bit later. So for now, just know that Belial's back, and he's also just not joining the party alone. He's bringing a couple of friends from our Vessel of Hatred. So first up is our buddy Urvar. So Urvar's joining the roster of the Lair Boss ladder system. He's going to be filling out kind of like the lowest rung of the ladder. So he's going to be joining the party with the Varshans and the Beast and Ice and whatnot. So Urvar's back, and we're also bringing back another Vessel of Hatred character, the Harbinger of Hatred.
So happy for this.
Yeah, no, this one.
I love this fight.
We're going to see a little bit more of this guy.
Harbinger.
Just a little bit, but the Harbinger of Hatred will be joining kind of the second rung of the ladder with the likes of Duriel and Andariel. And one thing I just do want to stress is that both of these Vessel of Hatred bosses will dip into the shared pools of other bosses within their respective tiers, but also have some additional bonuses that is specific to the Vessel of Hatred, like being a great source of tributes and wins. But Belial, for all intents and purposes, is available to everyone, and he is just the new pinnacle challenge of the boss ladder.
2.5 体
So you're saying even harder than Duriel and Andariel right now.
ですかね。追加することになると。
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, Belial.
New top tier.
Yeah, new top tier. Belial, Lord of Lies, he does not mess around.
And I'm really excited about this because I think this is going to pair really well with the sort of leveling journey and the torment progression where we're making things a little bit more aspirational, a little bit more challenging. It's really like a return to the heart of the Diablo experience, right? Sort of leveling from nothing.
ただチャレンジングになるかどうかは、それは実装次第というか、運営次第ですね。アンダリエルにしてもデュリエルにしても、チャレンジングにすることはいくらでもできたと思うんですけれども、まあ、それがチャレンジングにならなくなったのは、持ってき方がまずかったからですよね。そういうことがなければ、楽しみな実装になるんじゃないかなと思います。
I like to affectionately refer to him as Baby Belial, but this is Belial in his more compact form. And throughout the course of the season, or I guess just the lair boss mechanics, he's going to be popping up all over the place. But I'm really excited about this version of Belial's new role in the lair boss ladder system in the sense that defeating and looting any of the lair bosses has a small % chance to initiate a surprise ambush from Belial himself. And this is really cool because this is kind of like a 2 for the price of 1 payout. So let's say I fight Andariel, I defeat Andariel, I loot Andariel, and I get this special ambush triggered. And if I defeat Belial, I'll get a double payout of Andariel's loot. So I got the loot from Andariel, and I get another payout of Andariel's loot from defeating
例えば、アンダリエルを倒して、で、アンダリエルを倒した後に、ベリアルが出てくることが、まあ、例えばあると。で、そのベリアルを倒すと、アンダリエルの、その、戦利品ですね、ドロップが2倍になるみたいな、そういう仕掛けを考えてるのかな
？to his larger supreme form in the lair boss ladder that I'll touch upon a little bit later. A lot of teasing that I'm kind of just setting up. There's a lot to go over.
なので、これがベリアルのようですね。ディアブロ3のようほど巨大な、ボスではないみたいですし、出現の仕方もちょっと、得意なのかな？
sweeping updates that's coming in with just the system as a whole. And I want to talk about the summoning materials. As we know, the way that the system currently functions is, you go do activities, you get summoning items, you go visit the boss.
はい、召喚アイテム、召喚素材ですね、についての話に移ってます。
So when we're looking at the lair boss system, we don't just look about ways that we can add to it. We also look about, opportunities to, resolve or reduce some frictions, or just areas for improvement that we can have with it. Since it's a very mature system, we get a lot of feedback that we, diligently ingest and talk about and whatnot on our team. So when it came to the summoning materials, we identified a couple of key points of, I guess, friction that players are currently having with it. One is, since you have to ante up your summoning materials just to summon the boss, it's kind of a feels bad moment when you realize that you just wasted, X number of materials to find out that you can't defeat Duriel. Like, okay, that's wasted materials, back to the loop. Maybe I'll fight him another week or two, depending how fast you are. And it's just generally not a great feeling for myself or for players and whatnot.
Yeah, I definitely have run into this where it's like, I'm only going to fight the boss when I can guaranteed win against it. Right. So you never actually.
And how do you know that too? Until
how do you know?
Trial and error.
Like you never really have that. Like,
ボス素材を集めるの、まあ言ってしまえばボス素材集めるのってそんな楽しい体験になってないよねということだと思います。
Like retrying it because well I've already invested it. I'm kind of committed. So with this new way, I don't need to invest those right up front. I can just go and fight them right away and see how strong I am without risking the materials.
Yeah. So we're going to cover the specificities of the new system and how it all works in a little bit. But the other kind of pain point that we identified with the current system is also just in regards to the party play. I think my little earpiece is coming out of my ear. There we go.
パーティープレイですか？
The earpiece just pops out all the time.
We do it live here. So the other element is just the party play, right? And as much as we want to kind of entrust in our fellow man and whatnot and engage in the boss rotations and whatnot, we have seen, some areas of friction where certain players don't engage in the boss rotations and they don't submit their materials. Like no one watching the stream would ever be guilty of this, but that does happen. It's shocking, but it does happen.
Belial is on the other side of the computer. It's like, I'll definitely pay the next rotation.
And then they leave and they take all their stuff. So that was another kind of area of friction that we experienced with the current summoning materials. So I think that's kind of enough of a preface just to set the tone for where the system is going now that we're introducing in Season 8. So
what are we doing?
What are we?
で、どうするって？
All right, so layer keys. So summoning materials are effectively being repurposed in their roles as a new item called layer keys. And what layer keys do, well, I'll just start with this, is since there's no more summoning materials, that just means that effectively all layer bosses are free to summon. So if you're not sure if you're ready to take on a Varshan or a Duriel, just go visit them. Kind of use them as a bit of a training dummy to see if you can actually, take them on. But what layer keys now do is they grant access to the defeated boss's hoard or their treasure chest that they drop. So now I'll just walk you through kind of the new flow. Imagine this with me. So you enter Duriel's lair. You walk up to his altar and you just click the altar to summon him. Again, no cost to you. You fight Duriel, you defeat him, out pops his hoard, and now the shards of agony which is now the lair key, you use that to open his hoard and get all the oodles of loot that you went to go visit him to do.
Yeah. And these work like Campfire Chat. So
召喚するだけなら素材はいらないと。で、自由に召喚できると。で、召喚した後、そのドロップまで欲しい場合、その召喚して敵を倒し、ボスを倒した時に落ちるドロップですね。レイヤーキーを、使って召喚するということなのかな。
And then, of course, if you're really lucky, you'll get a Belial ambush and you can get double loot.
Yeah, there you go. So a lot of new avenues and ways to kind of experience the system. So we also have the Stygian Stones. So Stygian Stones in Season 8 is living a new life now in the sense that we wanted to ensure that every boss in the first rung of the ladder, our initiate lair bosses, the Varshans, Grigors, Bisonites, Lord Zirs, and Uruvars now, that they're all equally relevant to getting you to climb to the next rung. So in addition to, you can take a screenshot of this chart here. I won't try and walk through the entire thing, but now Stygian Stones is a drop that can drop from any of the initiate lair boss tier here. And you can crush them into your lair key of choice for the second rung of the lair boss.
ちょっと字が小さいですね。これスクリーンショット撮ってもいいよと言うけれども、ちょっとこれは字が小さすぎるな。
Again, just giving a little bit more flexibility in how players actually engage and progress through the lair boss ladder. Again, as we know, all roads lead to Belial, Lord of Lies, the top of the pinnacle of the ladder at the end. Ooh, there's a lot. All right, final thing here is the item bloat reduction. So again, with this new system, we're consolidating all the lair keys to one lair key type per boss. So no more kind of managing two different materials and so I have enough material. I have 2 of these, 5 of these. It's just one material per boss. We're increasing the item stacking of these to 99, again, to cut down on some of that bloat. And one of my personal favorites here is that we're also normalizing the counts of required lair keys per boss rank. So all the initiate tiered bosses, they require the same quantity of their respective keys. So too the degraders and whatnot. So again, it's just cutting down on the total mental math and memory that is kind of affecting the, I guess, like on-ramping enjoyment of the current system.
Yeah, and Dario only needs 1 material, for example, as part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see in this chart here, you have Pincushion Doll, Shard of Agony, or the Stygian Stone is kind of the wild card that you can crush to any one of them. So let's say if Andaro needed 4 Pincushion Dolls, you have 3 of them, but you have 1 Stygian Stone, you can crush that into a Pincushion Doll and go get Andaro's hoard.
スティジアンストーン一つでもアンダリエルを召喚できる。今までのその召喚素材とは別にということでしょうかね。別にというか、今までの召喚素材は召喚素材として。
The new flow to access the lair bosses.
はい、レイヤーボスにアクセスするためのそのプロセスをですね、ちょっと。
The map presentation and the boss dungeon tooltips themselves. And I'll kind of just go through these kind of itemized order. So first, all of the boss dungeon map icons have been given a little bit of a beautification treatment. So they're a little bit more bold, red.
まず、レイヤーボスがいるダンジョンについてはもう少し太く見やすく赤くして目立つようにしましたよと。
One of the kind of ambiguities that we had with the previous version of this system was not knowing specifically which boss lives in which dungeon. Like, oh, who does
どのボスがどのダンジョンにいるかということがちょっと分かりにくかったので。
Lives in the Harbiger's Den. This is probably not the best example because who else would live in the Harbiger's Den? Yeah, but he technically does live in every single one of them.
はい。で、この洞窟というかダンジョンにはハーベンジャーがいると。 で、そういう、まあ、名前の付け方によって、というか、これ今頃言うか。今頃言うか、なんか余計な、そういう名前の付け方っていうか、ネーミングポリシーが非常に悪いんですよね、ディアブロ4。なんか意味のわからない名前をアイテムやらダンジョンやらにつけて、で、ユーザーを混乱させてっていうようなところがあったので、これはいい、変更ですね。多分だから、デュリエルがいるところはデュリエルズデンとか、なんか、もうちょっとわかりやすい名前になるんでしょう。
We just pop directly in and just get into it. And
で、直接飛ぶことができると。
And I think this is a great time to just outline. I've talked about the new bosses. I've talked about new mechanics. But we have a collection of really great existing lair bosses. And one thing that we wanted to take as an opportunity within the season was to also enhance every other lair boss that exists within the system. So every lair boss is getting a bit of a difficulty spike and new mechanics to, again, freshen up the fights that we've been knowing about.
すべてのレイヤーボスについて、新たなメカニックを追加することによって、少し歯応えを増したということでしょうかね。
Duriel has some messed up surprises.
Yeah, Duriel eats you.
Why did you spoil it?
ネタバレ批判。
And just as a reminder, one thing that we do when we add a boss to the lair boss system is we don't just take the carbon copy, campaign version of it. We also take the
キャンペーンバージョンのボスをそのままカーボンコピーしたようなことにはしないで、もうちょっとメカニックに攻撃パターンに少し変更を加えたりしていますよということですね。海藤優さん、なんとかレンジャーさん、なんというか DLC ないといけないね。そうですね、スカベンジャーについてはそうですね。サクさん寝坊しましたということで、はい、おはようございます。はい、今日もゆっくりしていってください。まあまだ始まった序の口です。序の口。
But we fast forwarded past, the Harbinger of Hatred's fight. So let's imagine a world that, we fought through the whole thing, we killed him, and let's show off now what to expect from the Horde loop flow. So we have some,
倒した時にどういう風になるかということですね。
So we have 4 abhorrence hearts, and now we can open up the chest. Again, each one of us needs to have it. And I mentioned that Belial has a chance to surprise ambush you after opening any horde. はい。で、ベリアルが出てくるということですね。はい。ベリアル、確率で、ベリアルが、出ることがあると。で、ベリアルを倒すと、さらに、ドロップが落ちると。はい。ダブルルート。はい。ドロップが倍。獲得できるということですね。はい。
And if you noticed, you might have seen we did keep a bonus for party play. So while you do have to pay to get the chest and open up the horde, we kept a bonus chance for loot. So we love that people enjoy fighting the bosses as parties, and we know that that's a fun social experience in Diablo. So what we've done is the hordes themselves will have bonus chances for loot when you are in a party, and that does scale with party members.
Yep, no, absolutely. So a lot of loot everywhere to give. And on the topic at the very top, I teased that Belial had a very special kind of role in the reward structure, different from every other boss. So defeating the ambush version of Belial is not just lucrative in the sense that it's a double payout. He is also the sole source of the lair keys that you need to access his supreme form at the top of the ladder, the Supreme Form's Horde.
ベリアルはどうやらアンブッシュフォームとそうでないサプリムフォームと2種類いるみたいですね。
About the Supreme Belial's Horde is that you can set it to mimic the reward drops of any other existing lair boss. So let's say if you are trying to do Duriel runs to get the special stuff that he has, and you can set your Belial to drop the Duriel loot, and he will do so at an enhanced rate. So it's even better than if you just went to go fight Duriel specifically.
Yeah, so if you're really
デュリエルと、例えばデュリエルと直接戦うのではなくって、ベリアルに、デュリエルに化けさせることで、デュリエルのドロップを、ベリアルからゲットするなんていうこともできるようです。はい、リチュアル・オブ、ライズ、偽りの、ベリアルの、二つ名が、あれですね、ロード・オブ・ライズですね。はい。
All right, cool. Well, that is the lair key and the lair boss. I'm just have a lot of things to cover here.
I know we want to talk a little bit about kind of the. It's funny because people saw it as Ruben was on the map because they probably saw a term like with apparitions and everything.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of teasing in this.
I know, a lot of teasing. This is what happens when you use a live build and everything's fun.
Yeah, it's exciting. But one thing before we hop into the next thing, I do want to. Reestablish so that everything that we just talked about as far as what we're introducing to the lair boss system and all the mechanics, new bosses and whatnot, that is permanent. That is just how the system works now. So everything is getting introduced in Season 8, but it's not leaving beyond Season 8. It is just there.
It'll be an Eternal also.
It will, yeah, it'll be an Eternal. That's just how the system works. What the next segment, though, is all the seasonal specific stuff. So, again, as Adam mentioned,
これは今まで話した話は、シーズン固有のものではなくて、これからもずっと続いていく要素。で、これから話すのはシーズン要素というか、シーズン固有の要素になってきますよということかな。
Belial is back on Sanctuary, and he's spreading his own sense of, twisted realities across the land. He's always in his effort to try and plunge, the world of Sanctuary into his realm of lies, and he's doing it through this fast-paced boss rush style event that kind of takes the spirit of, the open world social boss play of the Blood Maiden, and making a really cool kind of just really fast-paced, bam, 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 boss rush style event. So I think we have some footage here just toスペ
ースの速いボスラッシュのようなイベントがあって、それで、
throughout the course, players are going to be defeating these apparitions to draw out up to 2 of his apparition bosses. This is pulled from a total of 10 potential apparition bosses, so each time you go through this, you'll fight 2 of them kind of randomized. So each time should be a little bit different. And all of this is leading up to a showdown against Belial himself. So again, it's celebrating bosses. It's 3 bosses per event. And the idea for this is that they're up pretty much 24/7. So we want to just encourage that, hop on the boss train, ride it to the end, find the next one, and just, go to your heart's content. And, celebration of bosses this season, really.
Absolutely. And what do you get for killing those bosses?
Oh, you're going to get some cool stuff, Colin. Let's go to the next slide. That kind of leads us into the collectible boss powers, seasonal powers. Spoiled it right there.
It's already on the slide.
It's already on the slide, yeah.
We're fine.
So the theme for, the powers theme for Season 8 is boss powers. So Belial being kind of like the illusionary character he is, mimicry and whatnot. In Season 8, players will be acquiring the ability to steal and mimic the powers of up to 24 targeted bosses across Sanctuary. So we have 24 collectible powers that are gathered from the first time kill of targeted bosses across the full content from level 1 till the very top. So you asked about, what do the apparition bosses give you? They're
24種類の、パワー、力ですね、を、各ボスから収集することができると。
So each one of our 3 world bosses have a power associated with them, and then so too do each of our lair bosses, capped off with Lilith with her own boss power that you can acquire.
It's like a ladder in the boss power.
It's definitely celebrating the progression journey of bosses from the moment you log in to the moment that you're powerful enough to take down Lilith.
Yeah.
Bilal being kind of like the star of the season, he's special. He gets 2 powers because that's just how he rolls.
Yeah, cheating.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things about this kind of structure, it's a very structured power climb. So little ambiguity of like, how do I get the Wandering Death's power? Well, go fight and kill him. It's just that nice little structured journey that kind of is a nice little stamp collection just to reward each kind of a tier of progression that you make across your leveling and endgame journeys. But that's not just the coolest part of it, in my opinion, here is that it's also just how the powers work this season. So you can see that we have 4 slots, the top slot and 3 little kind of like supporting slots. So the really cool thing is that each one of these powers have 2 sides to them that activate depending on which power slot you put them in. So you can have up to 1 main.
その24個の、
power slots. Or you can have up
パ
to
ワ
3
ー を、
power slot into your modifier slots.
力を
And let's want to dive into this Wandering Death's chest beam example here.
そのスロットに挿入、選択的に挿入することができると。
I would actually unlock the full representation of his iconic
で、それぞれのパワーには、
the actual iconic power that is representative of the boss. We're going to show kind of a little bit of a showcase after this. But that's how that respective area of the power system works. The modifier slots, though, are cool and powerful in their own right, though. So let's say I don't necessarily
メイン
need
スロットが1つと、モディファイアスロットが3つで合わせて4つということみたいですね。
by slotting it into the modifier slots, which activates kind of like the side B of it, which is more of a supporting thing. So in this case, it's your main power.
今これ、ワンダリングデスチェストビームという、パワーがあって、で、その中に、メインの力とモディファイアとがあって、で、メインのスロットに入れると、メインの側が、有効になって、で、モディファイア側のスロットに入れると、モディファイア側の、機能が、特性が働くということですかね。で、今、この4つですかね、を選択的に、スロットに挿入していると、そういう状況のようですね。
The relative impact of some of the seasonal powers was a little lower. They didn't really scale with you as well as we really wanted to. We've done an update in this season where these boss powers are going to scale with your Paragon level as you're leveling up, and so they actually are going to get more powerful as you get more powerful. Right. So the exact number that you as soon as you unlock it, it maybe is not the most powerful thing, but as you're powering up, it's still going to be relevant to your build at every stage of your progression.
Yeah, it's really good. And I like the fact that the powers don't kind of just live on their own little island. Like they get ingrained into the other systems that we're engaging with. So that's a high level of the boss powers for season 8. And I want to toss it back to Ruben for just kind of a little bit of a live showcase of them.
はい、ライブ映像で実際にデモを見てみましょうということですね。
Well, I did a fun job of showcasing all these powers today, but I must confess I got my smoothie, so I'm a little jacked up.
ルービン・マルケス。
I'm so happy you got your smoothie. So happy for you.
I try not to talk too fast.
I'm thrilled.
Let's go ahead and open up our inventory here, and you'll notice on the left side a familiar tab is our seasonal tab, which is boss powers.
はい。このボスパワーはシーズン要素になるということみたいですね。
Them on the fly. There's no penalty. I think the team and everybody wants you to experiment and have fun with the builds. You can also upgrade them by hovering over them. There's a corresponding button here on PC. It's F.
ランクが20まであると。
And yeah, so the top slot is your main slot, like Derek mentioned, this is where your main powers go.
一番上がメインスロット。で、下にある3つが、モディファイアスロットですね。
As a modifier, right, you can execute enemies, but as soon as you drag it over here, boom, now it's a channel ability. And you'll notice right away, it's a prominent beam. Yeah, it works well with
あんま
channel
り
abilities.
実装
It
と
only
して
works
綺
with
麗じゃないな。
and it's kind of cool with Dance of Knives because you can adjust and do these micro adjustments.
はい。でも、強力そうですね。
Keep it on them a little bit longer.
Yeah, and as you can kind of tell, we're not necessarily going for subtlety. in terms of, the
今
expression
の
of his
ボス
powers
パ
and
ワーのタブが一つ増えるみたいですね。
Oh my god.
I also want to just call it
で、
real
これ
quick.
は
Just
シーズン
one
要
thing
素
I
ですよ
absolutely
と。
love is just the animations of the UI itself, and you slot these little like eyeball powers into the little eye sockets, and it blinks, and yeah, it's just kind of just fun across the board, just engaging with this.
And pops.
Yeah. So what do we got next?
The next one I want to showcase is Lilith's Wind of Hate, just because probably
Lilith's Wind of Hate.
Her spike ability from the ground, and it works on almost every skill. So you can see as soon as I dash here, I get the spikes. With barrage, you get the spikes. So you can slot in almost every build and have fun with
ト
it.
ゲ、リリスが発生しているトゲが、
Let's see what else we got. Another fun one, there's a transformative ability is Duriel's
出るやつですね。
Burrow. So it completely changes your evade
デ
skill.
ュリエルの
And you burrow underground. You deal damage
Burrow.
when you go into the ground and when you exit. But the real cool thing is you become immune while underground and you can control the
地
direction.
面の中に潜ってる間は、すべての攻撃に対して、無敵であると。無敵化するということですね。はい。
Especially adding 3 new bosses with all kinds of crazy effects. You can now dodge them a little bit easier.
無敵化した状態で移動できるという、そういう能力のようですね。
we showed off a power that procs off of the evade. We showed one that procs off channeling and one that procs off any skills. Like one of the goals going into the design of these powers was to just remove any ambiguity about how do I actually proc it. We wanted to make it as utility focused and straightforward as possible so that players can really easily digest and how they work it into their builds.
Yeah, that's a great point. Urvar's bombs is probably my personal favorite as I like making builds and interesting builds. This definitely supports ultimate builds. And as you can see on the screen here, it lowers your cooldown by 5 seconds, which is great, and gives you a nice damage component to kind of top off on it. So we're playing Rogue, and Death Trap is an ultimate ability. So as soon as I pop it, you'll see Urvar's bombs kind of shoot out.
例えばでデストラップを起動すると、同時に4つの爆弾を、
That's on me. That's on me, guys. Yeah.
起爆すると。
on the stream. And finally, before they play the walk-off music, I think I could showcase. Let's do Grigor's Lightning Square. So if you notice, Lilith's skill had like a slight cooldown. This one scales with the build really well. So the more you can cast core skills, the more you get these iconic kind of lightning strike panels.
コアスキルを、発動すると、こうやって、雷ですね、が、イカズチが落ちると、そういう能力のようです。コアスキルを打てば打つほど、イカズチが、落ちるイカズチも増えると。いうことのようですね。
I think that's pretty much the wrap up for all the content coming in season 8 that persists beyond.
これはシーズン8のシーズン要素ですよと。
That will be available in PTR for players to actually jump into. We're still going to be talking about a few more things as we get closer to season 8 with the launch of the actual season itself. So, Derek, thank you so much for walking us through everything. And of course, with a new season and a new PTR, we have a lot of changes that are coming to classes, specifically like the Rogue, which we saw someone doing there.
Yeah, we can just skip.
Yeah, we'll just skip it.
There's other classes to talk about.
Yeah, so Charles over here is actually going to go through all the class changes that players will be able to experience and test out during the PTR.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's tons of new bosses to fight, so how are you going to fight them, right? So let's talk about some
たくさんボスが増えることになるので、それらのボスとどうやって戦うことになるのかということで、キャラクタークラスの変更、について話をします。
We introduced in season 7, the current live season, where as you get to rank 5 of the ultimate skills, some of them had mechanics that allow you to crank up their damage by building different stats.
奥義スキルという理解でいいのかなのスケーリングに、まあ、天井つけますよということかな。
A lot of very powerful builds. And so we're looking at ensuring that those don't like really eclipse every other option in the game. We still love that those are powerful builds. We love that you're playing them. We don't want them to be the only option. And so with that in mind, we're looking at putting a cap on that scaling.
強いビルド、強ビルドについて、強ビルドをプレイしてもらって、楽しんでもらってっていうのはいいんだけれども、それが唯一の選択肢になってしまうっていうのは避けたい。
crowding out other options of gameplay. Additionally, we're looking at crowd control. This is something I talked about on our last
CC ですね、クラウドコントロール。
How we're really looking at the moment-to-moment combat of our game. You know, like what are you doing, like like 1 second to the next. And one thing that came up a lot was sometimes enemies just randomly get crowd controlled. They randomly are frozen or stunned, and a lot of this comes from some of the what we call incidental crowd control, as in lucky hit crowd control effects, or anything that involves not like, oh, I pressed a button, now they're stunned, right? And we noticed like, hey, we got a lot of these effects across the game in many different places, and so we looked at really toning those down, specifically in the generic spaces. I know Fist of Fate is one of a very popular item right now for many reasons. One of them was that kind of free crowd control, but that's something that we think wasn't really promoting the best moment-to-moment combat and most engaging flow. So that particular affix has been changed to lucky hit apply vulnerable.
偶発性とかではなくって計画的に
So it still has, you know, wide ranges on things. It still does
行うクラウドコントロール。
as well.
Yeah, and this change really puts the value of Frost Nova and Ground Stomp. It sort of makes those more valuable and satisfying.
Right. Yeah. So if you really want to get those kind of crowd control effects, like it's going to be a build choice. You're going to have to consciously do it, and you're going to like know when it's happening. It's not just
そのあたりにもうちょっとフォーカスしたいということでしょうかね。
And that never felt good when it was just kind of purely random.
Yeah.
ランダムに発動するそういうクラウドコントロールよりもそういう意識的にはい、敵をクラウドコントロールする、そういったスキル。
And when it's poison, we call it poisoning, for instance. We didn't previously have names for shadow, lightning, or cold damage over time. We would just call it like from shadow damage over time affected enemies, which was an absolute mouthful. So we've got new common terms. Shadow damage over time will be called corrupting damage. Lightning damage over time is shocking damage. And cold damage over time, which we saw with the Wandering Death chest beam, is called frostbite damage. So that's just a terminology thing. It still relates to those base damage types, same as always. It's just a terminology update.
Cleans up the tooltips.
Absolutely, yeah. Nice. All right, so let's get on to some of the actual class updates, starting, we'll just go alphabetically with the Barbarian. All right, so our focus on Barbarian this season
バーバリアン、まずはバーバリアンからですね。
core fantasy of being physical and hitting enemies with a big weapon,
はい。物理のスペシャリストということで。
Barbarian have focused around things like earthquakes or dust devils, which are really cool and fun, but I think they we got some feedback that, hey, I don't really feel like I'm hitting enemies with my big weapon. I'm just making a tornado that hits them, which is not really fulfilling the
ダストデビルとかそういうのを使っててもなんとなくその武器で敵を縛いてる感が薄いと。
Heavy hitter kind of fantasy. And so a lot of the updates this season are focused around that.
で、そのフィードバックを得て、今シーズンでは、次期シーズンでは、もうちょっとそのあたり、その武器で直接ヒットすると、そういう意味での、 爽快感というか、それを重視したいと。
And make that just like the biggest hitting thing. Let's take a look at those uniques and the unique and legendary here. So we've got the Bane of Aja Den. This is a unique glove item.
Aja
And it says that every 12 seconds, your next Mighty Throw is going to detonate all of its pulses instantly. You know, normally Mighty Throw like pulses over time. It's going to do them all at once and deal massively increased damage.
12秒ごとに、次のマイティースローが、
Mighty Throw and Steel Grasp to gain multiplicative bonus damage rather than cooldown from cooldown reduction. So if you've got cooldown reduction on your gear or on the Bane of Aja Den,
乗算ダメージを
that's not going to actually reduce the cooldown. It's going to be a multiplicative scaler for these skills.
火炎ダメージか。600% の乗算火炎ダメージを、追加すると。
And so we've got a video clip of it just deleting a screen. So you walk up to it.
で、これ自体にマイティースローのブーストもつくみたいですね。
But of course, because it doesn't benefit from cooldown reduction, that cooldown is going to be pretty much locked at that 12-second mark. And so you're going to have to find some other way to kind of fill the gap in there. And you've got a new challenge for your build to overcome.
なんか当ててるっていう感じ
I think it is possible that you're gonna melt some
がするかというと、
Oh yeah.
どちらかというと紙って感じですね。
So for the Druid, I want to talk a little bit about one of the meta builds right
カイ
now.
トユさん、火炎はダメだって物理だっつってんだろう。
Snapshotting issues that come up with that.
そうですね。
For those of you who don't know what snapshotting basically means is for Cataclysm, which is one of their ultimate skills that has a duration. So you press the button, it summons a storm around you that lasts for some amount of time.
ドルイ
And you get a
ド
lot of that
で
cooldown
すね。
reduction, and you can cast Cataclysm a second time before the first one expires. Currently, on the live game, the second cast of Cataclysm will keep all of the bonuses and like bonus damage effects or guaranteed overpowers or whatever that was affecting the first one. And that was definitely not intended. That is not how we wanted that to work. We didn't want bonuses from one cast kind of instance to carry over to the next cast. Now this can only happen in situations where you get that lot of cooldown, but it was kind of promoting this gameplay where it's very feast or famine. If you successfully kind of snapshot all the buffs, this build is insanely powerful. And if you mess it up or you don't get the snapshot quite right, you're actually really weak. And that led to unintuitive gameplay and this really big divide between the best and the optimal and like kind of the average normal case scenario. So we're addressing that where we don't really want to promote that between two different cast snapshotting.
Yeah, we don't like snapshotting.
Right, yeah, the kind of snapshotting where you are persisting things
2つ
between
2度詠唱したとして、最初の詠唱が、2つ目の2回目の2度目の詠唱に対してスナップショットできてしまうという状況は、こちらが意図した挙動ではないので、それはちょっと避けたい。
There are some cases where, with Cataclysm, giving the bonus to that whole that first time you cast it, you might say it's kind of snapshots for the duration of Cataclysm, but that's intended, where it says your next cast does something. That's what we want, but we don't want that to persist on to multiple casts or through basically infinite.
日本語版でなんてスキル名になってるかわかりますか？わかる人いますか？ドルイド。
playstyles as well. We think that build is fun, but there's other ways to play Druid as well. Specifically with Stone Burst, that's the Earth Core skill. It was kind of a channeled skill, which for a lot of our channeled skills, they are not allowed to overpower.
ライランですか。
But with
はい
Stone
はい
Burst
はいはいはいはいはい。
reworked one of its legendary items to
それで
allow it
詠
to
唱なんで
overpower
す
when
ね
you。detonate it
なるほ
at
ど。
maximum
ありがとうご
size,
ざいま
which is
す。
really
カイト
cool
ユさん。
and opens up some new build possibilities for Stone Burst. And finally, I want to talk about the new unique Gathlin's Birthright. This is let's take a look at it on screen here.
新しいユニークみたいですね。このガスレンズ、バースライ
But
ト。
rather than talking to werewolves or werebear builds, it's talking to human form builds. If you don't want to embrace the wilds quite as much, you want to stay in your human form, Gathlin's Birthright is going to be the unique helm for you. It says, while you're in human form, critically striking enemies with your nature magic skills will grant anima of the forest for 10
型の
seconds.
状態
And
の
when you
時
gain,
に、
whenever you gain anima of the forest, you are infused with bonus key passives, Perfect Storm and Earth and Might. So if you have this and you have another key passive, you could potentially have up to 3 key passives active at once, which is not something we've ever done before in Diablo 4.
And I love that it's on the helm. So if you really want to be a human druid, which historically, hasn't been as great as like werewolf, for example, this is the helm for you.
Yeah, this is exactly that. It's in a similar spot as like, hey, this is build defining in the way that Tempest Roar is for werewolves. We want this to be the build defining helm for human form druids.
人型で専門で戦いたい人向けのヘルメット、兜のようですね。
I think we've got a picture of this, or a video of this in action, where you've got your druid, it's got you, you need 200 stacks of Anima of the Forest, which sounds like a lot, but it triggers on every hit. So in most combat situations, you actually stack it up pretty quick. And see, once you get this online, you're going to be empowered with Earth and Might, and with Perfect Storm, and with Nature's Fury. You have all of this power.
And the idea of three passives going at once is the key passives is crazy. Yeah.
And then a boss power slapped on top of that too.
Oh yeah, it is a lot when you get this empowered state. All right, moving on to one of my favorite classes, the Necromancer.
はい、ネクロマンサー。
So Necromancer was probably the talk of the current season, season 7, with Bloodwave. I know we've mentioned it a few times on stream. Bloodwave.
はい、シーズン7でも猛威を振るっているネクロマンサー。
So maybe it won't scale up with that bonus damage, at least not to the same level that it had before. We're going to put a cap on that. We also just think we generally overshot the mark on the
一応キャップを設けると、今以上に火力を増強するとかいうようなことはしませんよということですね。
And when you have one item that is, you equip it and it's over. Like you're as powerful as you ever need to be. That really shortcuts that journey and really makes it feel less satisfying than we want.
まあ要するにナーフ弱体化が入るということなんでしょう。
As well as some other adjustments to Bloodwave. We do want Bloodwave builds to still be powerful and still be an option if you like that playstyle. We just don't want it to be the S++ tier that it was in the past.
今までのような壊れビルドになるのは避けたいけれども、それでもブラッドウェーブが強スキル、強いスキルであり続けるようにはしたいということですね。
Right? So with this update to Bloodlands, it's going to still maintain some of that fantasy where it arcs the damage between enemies, but if you're hitting a target who's already lanced, it's going to do a massive amount more damage. So it's much better in single target situations and much more viable for bossing.
シングルターゲットやボス戦やなんかで、やっぱりブラッドランスが、強力であり続けるようにしたいと。
So this weapon will empower your summons, so your minions and your army of the dead to affect enemies with Vampiric Curse. Now, for those of you who played back in Season 2, Vampiric Curse was a mechanic that we introduced in the Season of Blood, where you affect enemies with it, and as you kill them, you kind of collect their soul. And then you can unleash these souls. They kind of run out from you and explode, and it's really a satisfying moment. And we put that on a handful of legendary aspects, but now all of your summons will affect enemies with Vampiric Curse. And you can unleash them with Army of the Dead. And when you do that, the souls from Vampiric Curse and Army of the Dead itself will deal massively increased damage, scaling with how many souls you collect.
カースという、シーズン2の、シーズン要素で出てきた、ヴァンピリックパワーですね。吸血力で出てきた、吸血スキル、吸血力スキルを、リバイブした、そういうユニークのようですね。
Your skeleton warriors explode on death, dealing a massive chunk of physical damage to surrounding enemies. And to help make sure they die, they lose 25% life per second while in combat. So you're going to be needing to resummon them quite often, but when you do, hey, it's good because they're going to be detonating for this massive chunk at the end. And additionally, while you're resummoning all your warriors, your mages are going to be super tanky. They're going to take 90% less damage and deal massively increased damage. So you're going to have your mages up pretty much all the time, and you're going to be focusing on resummoning the warriors to run in there and explode and do their damage that way.
That's awesome. It's a really clever way to make it feel like you're constantly summoning, and you have your backline of mages just to play.
Let's take a look at Sanguivar Blade of Zir in action here. Oh no, sorry, this is actually Service and Sacrifice. So you've got your skeleton warriors, the skirmishers, they run up there. And then here's Blade of Zir, right? You get all those like skeleton warriors running out when you activate Army of the Dead. Not you just get the
Army
ones
of the
that are running around, but then
なんだったかな。
you unleash a stream of them straight from you. With the
それを発動するたびにあちこちでボコボコ爆発を起こさせるということですね。
That is just so underutilized, so I'm so happy to see it come back into the fold.
It's great. All right, next up, we've got the one we've been teasing for a bit. Thank you, Ruben. The Rogue. Let's take a look at the idea with Rogue. So, as you probably guessed, the theme of Rogue this season is looking at trap builds.
今回は罠にフォーカスし、シーズン8は罠にフォーカスしますよと。
Death trap builds have been quite popular, pretty powerful, and a lot of fun to play. Poison Trap
Poison Trap versus Death Trap.
It had a number of issues that we're looking to address this season to really promote Poison Trap as a viable standalone build. And what we were seeing from Ruben was the Scoundrel's Leather rework. Now this is a unique chest item that's been in the game for a while. It was about traps in the past. We've done a rework this season.
これは前からあったユニークですよね。Scoundrel's Leather.
You're going to get a bonus death trap. So you could cast Poison Trap or Caltrops or Death Trap itself, and then you get a second Death Trap.
何らかの罠を展開するとデストラップが発動するようになるかな。
Get into the fray there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so rogues are all about mobility and jumping around the battlefield and doing that kind of thing. This is just another tool in their arsenal to really jump in, put the death trap down, which groups up some enemies, and then they're ready for you to slaughter there. But let's take a look at the new items that talk to Poison Trap specifically. The Bands of Icarus Rose, these are unique gloves that says
Scoundrel's Leather とは別ですね。
It's always going to do its full damage over 3 seconds instead. So it's much shorter duration, but higher DPS. And it's always going to benefit from all of its upgrades. You know, that enhancement and those modifications. You just get all of them. You don't need to put skill points in. And normally, the two choices are mutually exclusive. You get both with these. And they're going to be even more powerful. Additionally, Poison Trap will now also benefit from your combo points if you're using those. It's going to have no cooldown during the inner sight if you're using inner sight. And if you're using preparation, its cooldown is going to be reduced by the preparation.
シンクロするというか、つながるということですかね。
Mechanics very well, and now it benefits from whichever one you want.
That's so cool. So it really makes it more like a core skill, something I can work into my rotation.
Oh yeah.
つまりポイズントラップの火力がコンボポイントと連動して上がっていくということですね。もしくはインナーサイトと
now also can scale up with some critical strike chance. So with aspect of contamination, it unleashes a poison burst when it detonates, like kind of initial upfront hit.
インナーサイトを使ってるときはクールダウンがつかないとか。
Then you're going to deal increased poison damage for a duration, which will of course increase the rest of the duration of the poison trap. And this is probably my favorite clip here. Let's get a clip of this one. Right, so you apply poison trap, which it's going to throw 2 of them out, and one of its upgrades knocks down enemies, and because it's increased, it knocks them down for quite a while, and so they just take a little nap in your poison traps. I don't recommend it, but hey, if they do, they take a ton of poison damage.
I love the knockdown animation of this guy enemy.
Yeah,
so good.
This guy just falls right
sit down.
ちょっとバーバリアンの時もそうでしたけど、火力が強すぎて、あまり
So it's awesome.
逆に分かりづらいかな。
All right, moving on, we've got our sorceress. So the sorceress class
で、ソーサレス
definitely is one
で
of
す
the
ね。
ones currently on season 7 that I think didn't have any of these real big outlier builds that we'd kind of talked about. Some of the highest highs come from like the blood necro or the druid with the snapshotting cataclysm. And I think I would definitely want to acknowledge that, you know, sorceress maybe didn't have some of those real outliers this season, and they were maybe felt like they were a bit behind of those. So as we talked about with other classes, we're definitely looking at bringing those outlier builds down a notch to bring them kind of back to the norm of some of the other builds, so they're not so far ahead. But for sorceress, we're looking at improving some of the quality of life and some of the interactions between some of their mechanics, like crackling energy, meteors and meteorites, and making sure they scale well with the build. Like crackling energy will now have the shock skill tag, so if you're building up damage for shock skills or some of the other synergies there, those now interact with your crackling energy. And additionally, with meteor and meteorites, they're not going to be able to scale with each other's damage, which helps builds just be a bit more
クラックリングエナジーは雷属性のやつかな。
supported. That being said, I think where sorceress has been in season 7 is in terms of like its power progression and the relative strength of its builds amongst each other is more of the closer to the ideal state of where we envision all classes ending up. We recognize that they are kind of a bit lower than other classes in season 7, but we're looking at bringing them up a little bit with improved quality of life and build options, and making sure that some of the outlier builds that's really skewing that perception are being brought to be
使い勝手を上げる方向で考えているみたいな話ですけれども。
exactly.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we're actively
ちょ
looking
っと
at
これ
again
デ
to
モ
the
見
point
たい
early
で
in
す
the season.
ね。
If things aren't really performing to the level of our expectation and it doesn't feel good, then those are things that we're going to buff. And sorceress is a great example of like what we're going to be really looking at.
Yeah, and we want to do that in ways that make. We don't just want to slap on a 50x scaler on sorceress. We want to make sure that the builds feel cohesive and coherent in a way that makes a lot of sense. And so that's what the bulk of our focus is for this season. Specifically, I want to talk a little bit about ice shards. That's what
アイスシャード、今まであんまり注目されてなかった、
the Hail of Verglass. This is a
スキルですね。
that's going to empower your ice shards to spread out rather than shoot in kind of a straight line, that kind of rapid fire. It's now going to be a spread pattern. You can hit more
は
enemies
い、
with it.
一直線に打つのではなくて、拡散させる方向で、
So it takes a lot of stacks. You need to be spamming ice shards.
拡散させるような感じで
a lot of bonus damage.
打つ
And it also is
み
just
たいですね。
still, in my opinion, a lot more usable, right? I like the spread pattern a whole lot. Lets you hit wider screen, and you can kind of like shotgun enemies if you get nice and close to them.
ショットガン効
And
果ある
shivering
の？
aspect, a new legendary aspect here. Enemies are going to take increased damage based on how much they're chilled or staggering. Now, historically, some of the frost sorks or some of the other builds that were heavy on those crowd control effects, sometimes they really struggled into bosses, which, hey, bosses are the theme of the season.
It's very appropriate.
So we're making sure that some of these new effects that scale based on the crowd control effects also work against bosses. So this will kind of
もし放射状に拡散してかつショットガン効果なんかあったりしたらかなり強くないですかね。違うかな。
And it's not night and day. Oh, I'm clearing trash mobs, and then I hit the boss, and you just feel so different. We want to make sure that's a bit smoother of an experience between the two ways of playing. All right, let's take a look at the Hail of Verglass with these new ice shards in action. Right, so they fire out pretty quick, they fire out in a nice spread, and you can clear through a whole
アイ
bunch
ス
of
シャード
skeletons
を
with this little
放
basket.
つ。
Multi-shot.
Oh yeah,
Multi-shot with ice shards.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right, and moving on to our final class here, the Spiritborn. So the
で、スピリッ
Spiritborn
トボーン。
was in
ちょっと肝心なところ分かりませんでしたけれども、すいません。
where it didn't have those crazy overpowered builds, but we think it's in a relatively healthy spot, and we're just looking at empowering new build options and making tighter synergies between the builds and giving you some new tools to play with. With that in mind, we took a look at Rushing Claw. It's one of my favorite skills on the Spiritborn, but never really found its way into any of the most popular builds in the past couple seasons since Spiritborn was released. And we've updated the two upgrade choices to be kind of transformative. It's kind of a, if you pick one upgrade, the current one, Rushing Claws has 4 charges. And so when you use a charge, you kind of quickly dash through an enemy. And so you got 4 charges, you can spam it 4 times real quick. The other upgrade now has been reworked where it gains even more charges. It gains 12 charges. But using it consumes all the charges. So really it has just one.
カイトユーさん、暴雷とか未だに誰も使ってないんだからなんとかしてほしいけど。
So now gaining cooldown reduction or gaining more charges actually just increases your damage output. And it promotes a very different play style for this. So you get kind of an option. You can choose the original version, which is still very powerful and very cool. Or you can choose the new upgrade and kind of spend all your charges at once, do a big kind of damage cooldown, and then work on building up those charges again to deal even more. Additionally, we've looked at Storm Feathers and specifically how they interact with the new unique item, the Sunbird's Gorget, which I think we've got a
ストームフェダーに関しては、新しくユニーク、を作ってサンバーズゴーゲットなる新しい、はい、アミレットを作ったみたいですね。アミレットってのがまたちょっと微妙かな。結構重要なスロットですもんね、ディアブロ4では。
For as many storm feathers as you can spawn, this fire storm can get more. But it only lasts for 8 seconds, so intensifying it or picking up more storm feathers, it's not going to extend the duration. So it's kind of locked to that 8-second duration, and then it'll reset. So you really want to collect as many storm feathers as possible in 8 seconds. And then it resets.
全レジがついて、早足がついて、で、しかも、スキルブーストがついてですね、悪くはないのか。で、さらに、ストームフェダー、
And following up on the theme with Rushing Claw, we've got the new Rip and Tear aspect, where Rushing Claw is going to deal increased damage and is empowered based on how many charges you had when you cast it. So if you're taking the upgrade that gives you 12 charges, it's probably always going to be with 4+, and so it's going to strike an additional time. But if you're choosing the option where you spend each charge as you go, it's going to go through a bit of a cycle. You're going to get an additional strike, then it's going to get a guaranteed crit, then it's going to get a guaranteed overpower, and when you just have one charge left, it's going to do more chunky heal to help keep you in the fight.
が、最大4種類、付加されるということですね。
All right, let's take a look at the Sunbird's Gorget in action here, right? So you're moving along, you're picking up tons of these feathers, and the firestorm around you just grows in intensity. You got lots of different ways to scale it up, and it provides a nice kind of passive AoE around you as you're picking them up. And you're really going to want to make sure you're kind of thinking about exactly how your character is moving to make sure you're picking up as many of these storm feathers as possible to maximize your damage output.
白いストームフェザーを拾いながら回収しながら
We got a lot of new class content coming for every class. We did get through all of them. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing all the new builds that these empower, how they modify old existing builds, and all the interesting combinations that I'm sure all of you will test out on the PTR and find out the most absolutely broken thing and let me know about it.
Yes, please let us know if you find something absolutely broken, which I'm sure.
はい、PTR なので、壊れビルド、壊れ性能のアイテムなど、壊れたものをもうどんどん報告してくださいと。はい、ふるって報告してくださいということですね。
So everyone can actually check it out, inspect it, do their theory crafting and everything related to that. Of course, with PTR, we kind of want to know when PTR actually begins. PTR is starting next Tuesday, and this is, of course, PTR on PC Battle.net. So players will be able to jump in starting on the 11th, and it'll run for a week there. I will note that players actually will be able to also
PTR は3月11日から3月18日の期間で開催されますと。
Translate that. using some sort of time tool, that will be when players will be able to pre-download. So it'll be about a day beforehand. One thing to note is, of course, the boost vendor, Marak, will be available, which will be dancing in town for everyone. But one thing we did want to note is that
PTR ブーストをするマラックっていうフォールンシャーマンですね。あそこでブースしてもらってください。
allowed players to do was immediately boost the second they got into PTR, and we really didn't get that whole entire flow as we were kind of going through.
The headhunt and things like that. So we also just want to hear your feedback on the leveling process, right? This is why we run the PTR.
はい、同時に育成プロセスに関するフィードバックも欲しいということで、いきなりブーストをするだけじゃなくって、育成過程に関するそういうフィードバックもよろしくお願いします。
PTR boosts will be available just a couple days after that. One other thing I do want to note is we will, of course, have our forums available and online for PTR. That is the best place to actually provide feedback.
はい、フィードバックを Diablo 4の PTR フォーラム等で、などなどで、共有してください。
So please put feedback in there because we are constantly checking in there for any notes, feedback from players on that end. One other note is within the PTR, you guys may see a term called the reliquary that may just kind of pop up here and there, and we haven't talked about the reliquary, nor will the blog later today actually be talking about the reliquary.
ブログポストかな。この後、配信後にブログポストが出るみたいですね。はい、PTR に関するブログポストが出ると。あれでも、セオリークラフトとか言ってたから、パッチノートではないのかな。
Especially for rewards that they're looking for. So we'll have a detailed breakdown of what the reliquary is before season 8. So looking forward to kind of sharing that before we actually kick off the season. And I know I have a lot. I'm trying to get through all my stuff. I know it's like I'm hungry.
まあブログの方になんか書かれるみたいなので。
For Diablo 4. And I will say that we are actively working on a roadmap that we can share with you all,
Diablo 4 に
which is
関
great
する
because it
ロ
gives you
ードマッ
and
プ
everyone
を
a opportunity to kind of see more of like the future vision of what's coming
は
for
い、
Diablo 4.
将来がの計画が見えるように、はっきり見えるように。
So we're really excited to share it. So as soon as we actually do have that available, we of course you'll hear it everywhere. We will be on every single microphone and megaphone out there showcasing what the roadmap is. And you've probably seen roadmap, if you're curious, like what does a roadmap entail, you've probably seen some of our fellow teams here at Blizzard, such as like Diablo Immortal or like World of Warcraft. They've actually posted these more public-facing roadmaps, and that's something that we want to do here so that you guys have that ability of being able to see what's coming out for Diablo 4 and more exciting news related to it.
When is that?
I know we have Q&A. We want to jump into Q&A here really quickly.
でき次第ということだそうです。はい。はい、Q&A ですね。はい、ロードマップに関してはでき次第、皆さんと共有しますということのようです。具体的にいつというようなタイムラインは提示されませんでした。はい。
Yeah, I can jump into that. So when you are fighting the
はい、パーティープレイが、レイヤーボスに対してどう働くのか、機能するのか。
So if you're in a party of 4 and you open up that horde, it's going to guarantee an extra unique item. So it scales with the amount of parties or party members you have.
パーティーの人数に比例して、ドロップ数が増える。そうですね。そうすると、やっぱりシングルプレイではあまりメリットが、対ボス戦のメリットがないということになるでしょうか。
Let's see, this is from Skulm TV. Any plans to place a blacksmith or vendor near the boss rooms to help people quickly salvage / clear inventory without having to go into town?
I think this is something that we can definitely take away and consider, especially with the revamp flow. That's definitely something that's interesting. One thing that the revamp flow does, I will touch on, is the amount of chain bossing really requires you to have a lot more materials. If anything, sort of some philosophy here is that we've heard a lot of feedback that it feels mandatory to play.
一応今、配信、視聴されてる皆さん、今実はアンケートやってまして、春の新シーズンあなたが一番プレイしたいハクスラタイトルは次のうちどれですかというアンケートを実施しています。選択肢は Diablo 4、Path of Exile 1、2、それとあとラストエポックですね。ラストエポックは、クラフトシステムが、この、4タイトルの中で一番優れているというふうにされていますし、一番アクション性が優れているというふうに言われているのが Path of Exile 2ですね。で、カジュアル勢にとって最も優しいというか、敷居が低いというふうに言われているのが、Diablo 4と。はい。で、スピード感が、とにかくスピード感があるのが Path of Exile 1ですね。はい。というふうに言われています。この中から、あなたが、3月末から4月末にかけて、リリースされる、新シーズン、どれを一番プレイしてみたいですかという、アンケートをしています。ぜひ、足跡とか残らないので、お気軽に投票してください。
And at the moment, I can say we're not for that specifically, but it is a thing that I think we didn't really clarify in regards to what from season 7 is kind of like for sure staying over. I will say like the witch powers are most definitely like something that aren't carrying over completely over to the future seasons, but one thing in regards to at least the Tree of Whispers is that like we have a bunch of new NPCs there. We redid the layout there. Yep. That is made that as a hub that doesn't feel like I'm just going for the tree and I have to like immediately leave. It's made it as like a all-encompassing place that you can most definitely tap into from that end.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I can speak a bit to the seasonal powers. As we said, a lot of those witchcraft powers are specific to season 7. That is true. They are not necessarily coming back in season 8. But we do hear that feedback, right? I think they got a really positive reception. A lot of like the poison frog, one of my favorites, fire bats, and all kinds of other things that are very visually flashy and just a lot of fun to play with.
ポジティブな評価が出ているようですね。でも、それは、妖術力に関しては、シーズン7固有の要素で、シーズン8では、何でしたっけ、ボスパワーに変わっていくことになりますと、ただ、将来的には、何らかの形でリバイブする、可能性があるので、まあそのあたりは今後の検討材料だということですね。
We've gotten a lot of questions related to PTR being on PC BattleNet and asking like, hey, is there any plans on bringing it to console, maybe soon?
はい、PTR をコンソール CS 機の方に開放する予定とかはないのかいっていうそういう質問がかなりたくさん出ているようですね。
In a smaller window, and we may need to change something really quickly. Just it gives us more flexibility and allows us to be able to change those things really, really smoothly. I know with other platforms and everything, there's more processes involved for good reason because they have more checks and balances and everything. So it makes it a little bit more difficult on our end to do some of those fast iterations that we may need with PTR. So in the foreseeable future, right now, we see PC BattleNet as being kind of the home for PTRs when we do end up testing anything. Question from my computer's telling me to update. It's been telling me for weeks. Don't hate me, IT. Chris Mate says, will the lair bosses have resilience damage reduction that the world bosses have to ensure that they just don't get one shot too fast with some classes or builds I can't talk today.
Trivializing. Yeah.
I can't even talk.
I think this is a great question. It's something we actually talk about on the team a bunch. And, from our perspective, adding something like resilience would sort of devalue that power progression. Like we feel like it sort of disservices that sort of 0 to hero. Once Belial was really hard, but now I've gotten so strong I can just crush him. That said, we do think that the level of one-shotting bosses that has been happening is a little bit too much. There isn't enough of a
は
journey
い。
to get to a point where I can
ボ
just
スに
stomp on
対
their
し
shoulder
て、
and
ワン
stomp
ショ
on
ッ
the
ト、
penitent.
一撃で、ワンパンしてしまうような、ことってのは、状況っていうのは、明らかに行き過ぎであってっていうことですね。
bosses should present more of a journey to getting to a place where you can really stomp on them throughout the torment tiers. Even Uber Lilith herself has been, or I don't remember what we actually call her.
Echo of Lilith. Echo of Lilith.
We just keep calling her Uber Lilith.
Uber
Apparently
Lilith,
now
it's
it's just stuck. Yeah.
Has seen quite a buff. And that should mean that that journey to getting to a place where you're really
象
far
の
from
残
these
響ですか。
bosses is a lot more fulfilling, but it's longer also. You're not just like walking into Torment 1 and one-shotting Varshan.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into what I talked about with some of the outlier builds that were just Bloodwave Necro, prime example of being something where you get one item and then suddenly you can one-shot everything. It's really not. It doesn't promote the best gameplay. Like it's just it's fun for a little bit to go in and one-shot everything, but that's something we think it's much more engaging to have a little bit of back and forth, and you're not just going in and stomping them, but you do feel powerful. Feel some power progression, and as you get more powerful and more gear and more Paragon levels, you do get more powerful, and it becomes easier to overcome these challenges, and then you start feeling that real powerful stuff as you really complete your build.
Yeah, and also
ビルドを、完成、ビルドが完成に近づくにつれて、いろいろ、ボスを倒すのが、どんどん容易になっていく。で、それによって、プレイヤーが強くなっているという実感は、持ってほしいということですね。はい。ワンパンは行き過ぎだけれども、そういう、プレイヤーが強くなっているという、そういう実感、体験は、大事にしたいと。
Inject new mechanics and updated mechanics to the lair bosses across the board to introduce that hiked challenge, but in an interesting way that's just more fun, I guess, really for us to enjoy.
We have a question related to, I'm going to speed through a few last questions here. Lilith, will Lilith ever make a entry into maybe the boss layer system or anything? This is from Ganon North.
Yeah, I think,
リリスが、ウーバーボスとかのレイヤーに入ることはあるのかっていうことですね。
pinnacle of the season's journey a lot of times, and that's something we can definitely think about, especially with this revamped flow of being able to summon the bosses. So we can definitely take that into consideration. That'd be a lot of fun.
Quick question
検討材料にはなりますと。はい。もちろん検討材料にはなりますという、ポジティブな反応ですね。
So if you're casting it at 4 or more charges, it only hits an extra time. It does not get guaranteed crit or overpower or heal you. It's you kind of either progress through one benefit at a time, or you just get the 4+ if you're using the new upgrade.
I'm going to do 2 quick last questions. I will end on the one that everyone's asking. I see it in chat. Don't worry. In regards to I lost it. There it is. From Mid Central Vowel. At what point will you start maybe potentially removing uniques that have proven to be not that useful? Or do you guys feel like uniques are feeling bloated in the current setup?
使えないユニークを削除する予定なんかはあったりするのか。
In terms of speaking to every skill, like I think that's something that you see with the poison trap and you see with ice shards. That is sort of why we have the boss ladder, to give you more deterministic, or maybe not deterministic, but targeted ways to find some of the uniques you're looking for. This lets us have a lot of different uniques, but things that you actually have to target. The other thing I'll just say too is, like, part of the game is random items and figuring out how to assemble a build out of the random items. So like, we don't want to get to a place where I just sort of log into Diablo and I get all the uniques I want, and then I'm sort of done with the game, and it's just sort of this linear deterministic track through getting the pieces that you want. But that said, like we're always sort of listening to the
必要な
feedback.
ユ
And
ニ
it does
ー
start to feel
ク、
like
まあ
we're
欲しいユニー
constantly sifting through things
ク、
that we
ビル
care
ドを
about.
完成させるのに必要なユニークを全部揃え
Yeah,
た。
and I think
じゃ
on the
あ、
design
これで
side,
俺は
when we're
終わった
looking at
みたいな
unique
感
designs,
じに
I
はしたくない
think,
と
there are。still some spots in the game, like with Poison Trap this season, where there were some skills or some play styles that had
もしそれを言うのであれば、あまりそのなんだろう、ビルドをブリザード側が用意する毎シーズン毎シーズンそのブリザード側でそのビルドを提案用意するっていうのではなくて、ブリザード側も開発人側も予想していないようなその意外なビルドがどんどん生まれるようなそういう方向に開発が進むといいんじゃないかなと思うんですけれども。
So that's one way that we're going to look to find those underused uniques that really maybe don't find a home. We're going to constantly be reevaluating them and seeing how we can kind of plus them up and make them achieve the potential and fulfill that build niche that they were intended to do in the first place.
All right. I'm going to end it with the last question because everyone's asking this related to
っていうのかな、ユーザーの意見を聞きすぎるところと、自分たちのそのアイディアを前面に出しすぎるところとのバランスが非常に悪いのが現状で、そこをうまく調整するだけでもまだまだディアブロ4は伸びしろがあるんじゃないかな、大きな伸びしろがあるんじゃないかなと個人的には思っています。サクさん、自分たちでビルド用意しておいてバグでしたとかありますね。はい、ありましたね。
There are some tuning changes we've made just to make the game, the pieces that we have today,
てかそんなんばっかりですね。
a little bit more aspirational and challenging and satisfying to overcome. We really think Season 7 was a fun candy rush, and it was a sugar rush, sort of like the smoothies everyone's binge drinking behind the scenes.
Not everyone.
Not everyone. Yeah, only the important people
behind
behind the
that
screen.
says that it got delivered midstream.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah, Marcus redeemed.
Yeah, but Season 7 was really fast, and we do think when the game reaches that state of where just nothing really, you have to work for it, and it's just really fast, and it's over in a weekend, totally, there's not enough things to work towards. So we are sort of taking an approach, again, with some of the balance changes to make some of the game feel a little bit more aspirational, and it's a focus for our team going forward.
Yeah, I will say we've had conversations about this. I feel like almost weekly. Colin and I talk about it.
実はもう一つ気になってることがありまして、PTR の日程は先ほど発表になりましたけれども、シーズン8の日付は結局発表されずじまい。
Again, PTR is going to be starting next Tuesday. You can early download on PC Battle.net starting Monday afternoon, California.
海藤優さん、せっかくもらった強化はだいたい次シーズンになくなるから。アダム・ジャクソンがいなくなって体質がいい方向に変わったと思いたい。なるほど。
The new boss layer system, of course. The new powers that are associated with it, all the class changes, and all the quality of life stuff that we talked about with, in terms of like the leveling journey as you're going up within this new season. So, really looking forward to everyone jumping in.
育成過程がもうちょっとマシになっているかどうかっていうのも確かに重要なテスト項目の一つかもしれませんね。
Starting all next week. Thank you guys again. We have March of the Goblins, which is currently going on in Diablo 4.
ゴブリンの更新ですか。はい。
Tonight. So if you're a big D2R person, feel free to jump in. It's always a fun time. We will see you guys
それとあと、ディアブロ2リザレクテッドのシーズンリセット、ですね。ラダーリセットが、この後、午前10時からですかね、ありますので、そちらの方もよろしくということでした。はい。そんなわけで、2時間、一応かからずに済みましたね。はい。少々お待ちください。 ちょっと画面戻しますね。はい。まあ、シーズン8に関しては、ベリアルを含めた、その、ボスラッシュとは違うか。ボス戦、ですね。ウーバーボスが、どうもメインになるっぽいという、そういう発表でした。まあ、ちょっと、パスオブエグザイル2とかラストエポークとかと比べると、押しが弱い気はしますが、まあでもベリアルが出てくるっていうのは一つで、しかも出方が今までのその、ボスと、ちょっと違うっていう意味では、少しワクワク感があったかなという気はします。はい。まあ、一応、今のところ、シーズン8は4月中旬以降、4月中旬もしくは下旬かなというふうに言われています。はい。で、この後なんですけれども、ちょっとすいません。この後なんですけれども、はい、これかな？はい。今日ですね、午前9時45分から、ディアブロ2リザレクテッドの、ラダーリセットがあるので、それに向けたスタートダッシュの配信を予定しています。こちらの方も合わせてですね、関心のある方はよろしくお願いしますということで、はい。一応視聴者参加型で、初心者でも、気軽に参加していただけたらなというふうに思っています。はい。ちなみにですね、今、ディアブロ2リザレクテッドはセール中で 65% オフだったかなかなんかで、結構お安くなってます。もし関心のある方はですね、ハクスラの、まあ、POE とか POE2 とかラストエポックとか、すべてこれディアブロ2の影響を受けた、ハクスラですので、ディアブロ2が、それだけ影響を与えたっていうのを、なんでなのっていうふうに思う方は、ぜひ、興味あれば、プレイしてみてはいかがでしょうかということですね。はい。そんなところで、今日の配信を一応一段落一区切りつけたいと思っています。ユーズディアブロラボは、ディアブロシリーズをはじめとする様々なハクスラタイトルについて深々と掘り下げていくチャンネルです。もしよろしければ、チャンネル登録とか、で、あと今日の配信ですね。いいなと思ってくださった方は、ぜひ高評価、等をつけていただけると嬉しいです。はい。それでは、2時間ですね、にわたって、今日もご視聴くださってありがとうございました。サクさん、寝坊分はアーカイブでゆっくり見返しときます。そこまで、濃い話はなかったかと思いますけれども、ありがとうございます。嬉しいです。はい。それでは、今日の配信これまでとしたいと思います。皆さん、今宵も良い狩りを。